Good morning, church. We're in John chapter 20 today, so thank you for joining us in this discussion. This coming Sunday is Easter, and we will be reading the entire chapter 20 in our live streamed service. So I hope you'll join us on Facebook as we stream that and as we share the word-for-word description from John's own lips about what that event was like. It begins in a very peaceful way, contrasting to chapter 19 where there was such fear and uncertainty. Now, chapter 20 begins pre-dawn as Mary Magdalene and some other women travel to the grave to finish preparing the body for burial. And when they get there, Mary notices that the stone that had covered the grave had been rolled off to the side. And her first thought was not resurrection. Her first thought was our first thought. Somebody had come and desecrated the grave, stolen the body. And she ran back to the disciples to tell them that. And Peter and John ran to the grave to see what had happened. When they got there, they noticed that the grave clothes were still there in the grave. Some in disarray, some folded up to the side. It didn't look like a grave robbery had taken place. And so they traveled back to report to the other disciples, leaving Mary Magdalene there alone in her grief and her sorrow. And she looks inside the grave and sees two angels there, and they ask her why she's crying. She turns and hears what she thinks is a gardener behind her asking her why is she crying, and she turns and replies to him, they've taken the body and I don't know where he is. And that's when he says a word that she had heard him say hundreds of times before. He calls her by name and calls her Mary. I don't know if it's something in his tone of voice or in the familiarity of that word, but at that moment she recognizes who this is. And she turns and she just, in excitement, calls him teacher, Rabboni, and goes to hug on him. But he says, no, not yet. There's more to be done. He meets with the disciples, and as he meets them, he invites them to touch his wounds as evidence. Clearly, they are astounded by this. And he says, peace be with you. They are probably anything but at peace seeing this. But he says, peace be with you. This is good news. The story concludes with the appearance to the one disciple who was not present. The appearance to Thomas. I love this story. It's probably one of your favorites too, because when the disciples report to Thomas who they had seen, he said, unless I touch the wounds, unless I see it firsthand, I'm not going to believe. And that's when a few days later, as Jesus appears, he says to Thomas before asked, come and put your finger in my side, touch my wounds. And to that, Thomas replies, my Lord and my God. You know, the entire impact of the story of Jesus is summed up in the resurrection. If he had died on a cross, convicted unfairly, and died on the cross, buried in the grave forever in that grave, it would still be a tragic story, but it wouldn't be a story of redemption. It is because Jesus rose from the grave that we treat him not as any other human being. We treat him as our Lord and our God. I'd love your thoughts on the matter, so reply to Facebook as you read through this chapter. What jumps out at you? What strikes you as of particular importance to you as you read about the resurrection? May this Sunday be a Sunday of celebration for you, and may your life be lived in response to the resurrected Jesus. Hope to see you soon.